All right, I think I'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks for joining us today for the UNH Sustainability Institute Sustainability Fellowship host organization info session. I want to introduce myself. My name is Vania Ahmed, and I am the Network Stewardship Coordinator at the Sustainability Institute. A key part of my role is to coordinate the Sustainability Fellowship, and I'm delighted to have you joining us today to talk about the program, applying to be a host, and if you have any questions about the host organization as you move ahead in the fellowship. Here you can see our agenda. We will start with an introduction to the Sustainability Institute and the program. Then we would move on to hearing from our past Sustainability Fellowship host organization. We will then go over the RFP and next steps. And after that, we will have some time for your questions. We will have about 40 minutes of material. And then after that, we will open it up to questions until 2 p.m. I'm especially excited to have two Sustainability Fellowship host mentors here with us today to speak about their experiences. Before we start, I just want to let you know we are recording this session, so you will be getting a link to the webinar later on. So with that, let's get started. Let's start with getting to know UNH a bit more. UNH is a national leader in sustainability. In 2022, we celebrated 25th anniversary of UNH Sustainability Institute, and UNH is super proud of being one of the only 8 schools in US to currently hold Platinum Star rating from Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. UNS students drive sustainability leadership by being involved in Changemaker Collaborative, which brings together students, faculty, staff, businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies committed to advancing positive change for the good of all. Oftentimes, we get asked, what is sustainability all about? That is a great question. UNH Sustainability Institute aligns with the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which you see listed here. So this makes us our sustainability across disciplines. And we are trying to make sure that we touch as many topics as we can and work on advancing sustainability. It is helpful to be reminded that sustainability here is a large umbrella where there are many potential projects to advance the UN SDGs. And of course, we are here to talk about the Sustainability Fellowship. The fellowship is all about matching amazing undergraduates and postbaccalaureates with excellent organizations like yours that are doing important work in sustainability. We set the stage with well thought out and planned projects in a collaborative atmosphere. And in turn, our goal is to build resilient communities and a resilient world. This is a brief overview of the program, and now to go into a bit further and discuss what sets this opportunity apart from other possible internships. Typical internships opportunities are what many of us are aware of and many of us are familiar with, but many times internships are more of a benefit to the intern. They get a glimpse of what it's like to work in a professional setting, get to support a couple of projects, but by the end of the summer, many times it's more of a burden than support to the host organization. It is a lot more work for minimal results and lack the structure where you feel strongly connected to the intern and the work that they have put in. And there are so many times where their last date sneaks up on you and you can't believe that it's already time to say goodbye. So internships can be helpful, but mostly it is helpful for the intern, but there's missed opportunity for a bigger impact there. So let's talk about the fellowship and why it's unique. That's why we have the fellowship. It sort of talks about the triple win. First of all, we design the project so that the fellows can own the project and create a high impact. The fellow will take responsibility of the fellowship project, and the project is designed to get something done which will sustain your organization into the future, which creates an impact on the communities and regions you are working in. So we try to make sure that the fellowship project is in a way that even after the fellow leaves, that creates continued profit for your organization in terms of community impact and sustainability. And at the end of the summer, fellows will have added value to your organization and had immersive and high quality learning experience, possibly even launching a career in sustainability. Some of the fellows actually ended up launching their careers in sustainability after the fellowship and before they were not really sure of it. So it's a great career launching opportunities for many of their students. And then, of course, the high impact project that benefits the organization and fellows also means there is an advancement in sustainability. We are grateful for organizations like your own to partner together to create this triple win: a win for your organization, a win for students and post baccalaureates, and of course, a win for the world at large. Here I have a quote from one of our 2022 sustainability host organizations that is wonderful reflection on what sets the fellowship program apart. I will give you a few minutes to read through it, but I really like how they talked about. I was also impressed by the way that the UNSI team balances strong organizational structures, example, the work plan and feedback on that work plan, with mindfulness and grace towards nonprofit organizations that may already be overwhelmed. So we've already touched on that fellowship experience is a little different from the internship. And it is designed to create impact to your organization and training the next generation of sustainability leaders. But I want to take a step back and highlight the top 3 squares you see here. We have 17 years of experience. The fellowship program started in 2008, and every summer we reflect and reassess to further define the fellowship program and how to continue to grow and evolve the fellowship to best suit the needs of the host organizations as well as the students. Some of the best students from UNH come to this fellowship. So we have strong talent pipeline. You design the project. We find a highly qualified fellow with qualifications tailored to the needs of your project and organization. And then collaboration as part of the fellowship summer cohort. You're part of an active network who meets up in different spaces during the spring and summer, meeting up multiple times. This allows us to share resources with each other and together work towards the goals of SDGs. Another quote from a 2024 mentor: what an incredible opportunity. I have told so many people about it, for a fellow to have 2 strains of learning at once: the organization they are with and the UNH program community. It is just fabulous and unique. The fellow was tremendous fit for our organization and threw herself right in. We are so grateful to have been part of the program. Thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about, so if your proposal is accepted, what is next? This is what will happen in preparation leading up to the summer. So first, with support from UNH, host organization, write a fellowship project description. We have a template in place for this, and a lot of information will come from your proposal. Together, we will finalize your description, and this is what will be used to market your specific project opportunity to potential fellows. After that, UNH markets the fellowship to different undergraduate and graduate students as well as recent alumni. We will then review your applications. We will then review the applications of the students, send you the top applications for your review. And once you choose that, we go and review the top candidates and choose a fellow. So once the fellow is chosen and they have accepted, we connect the host organization, HR, with the fellow to conduct onboarding. So once the fellow is chosen, they have accepted, we will connect them with your HR contact who is already ready to onboard them, because we will be having that discussion with them months prior. Once you are accepted, we will be having that discussion with them. Around the same time, we will look at projects we have selected for the summer and coordinate multiple project advisory groups. These advisory groups are going to be super beneficial. They basically provide you an opportunity for your fellow to have that place where they could discuss about work that is related to it and have advisors who have expertise or know about that field. So it is a great opportunity for them as well as you to have that project advisory groups. And finally, the last step as the summer approaches is to craft a detailed 10-week work plan for your project. Once again, we have a template and examples of what it could look like, but it's a great opportunity for you to have that in place before even the fellow starts. This is where you come up with like the best plan for your fellow to accomplish your high impact project. All right. So what does the summer look like? Fellows, of course, are focused on their fellowship project with their host organizations. Your fellow will be working on a day-to-day basis with you while being supported through the program activities organized by UNH that they will be participating in. Those activities are designed to set the stage for collaboration with the other fellows, to offer them support and to help develop their skills throughout the summer. Some of the highlights of that are we start the summer off with a 2-day orientation where the fellows get a chance to get to know one another, the UNH team, as well as host organizations that will be joining on the second day of the orientation. This is an opportunity to learn a little bit about the projects that will be going on during the summer and will lay the foundation for collaboration with everyone over the summer. During the summer, on weekly basis, there are a few different activities that will take place. Fellows meet weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. There's small advisory groups. This group will become sort of a sounding board for the fellows, a place to take like talk about work issues, talk to others about what work they're doing. Each sort of have this opportunity to talk to their advisors that will help and guide them. We have a couple of presentations during the fellowship to make sure the fellows are on track with their work and then do their and showcase their work. So this takes place with in-person launch event and then virtually in the final showcase presentation. These are some of the highlights of the activities that happen on the programic side of things to supplement and go along with the fellowship project that they will be doing at your organization. And then we move on to my favorite part, which is what do past host organizations and mentors have to say. Today we have two amazing host organization mentors with us. Many thanks to both of them for sharing with us a glimpse into the fellowship and their experience. I would want to give it first to Kara Jelson from Lawson's Finest Liquid to share about her experience and what was her highlight of the experience with the fellow.
Thank you so much, Wania, and welcome everyone. So excited that you're all here to learn more about what an amazing program this fellowship opportunity is. My name's Kara. I'm the Social Impact Program Manager for Lawson's Finest Liquids. We're a craft brewery in Central Vermont. We heard about the fellowship program from another company in our industry who had gone through the program and had a really great experience. And so we were really excited to jump in, and we hosted our first fellow this past summer. I have to just sing all the praises of UNH Sustainability Institute. It was an amazing, just like some of the quotes have shared earlier, just an amazing support system for our fellow. Our project, we were looking to implement our first ever carbon footprint analysis as a company, and we decided to focus our fellowship on really diving into the scope 3 emissions of that carbon footprint analysis. We had the opportunity to work with the UNH Carbon Action Clinic a little bit earlier this past year to start that work. And so we really had a clear idea for our project for our fellow up front. But that being said, we had a great idea, but we had no like detailed understanding of like how maybe our fellow would be able to get from point A to point B. And so just some of the work that we did to connect with UNH and specifically to connect with Alexis on developing our fellowship, developing our description, and also implementing our work plan was just extremely helpful. I have to shout out the work plan, developing that up front. It was a little daunting at first. I was like, I don't even know what our fellow is going to be working on exactly every week. Like, how can I figure this out? But spending the time to work through it and think about how to break up the project incrementally week by week was extremely helpful for us as the host organization to make sure that we were really ready for our fellow to come on board and be able to hit the ground running. And our fellow also shared with us that the work plan really was kind of seemed well thought out and was really like practical in helping her figure out how to break up the work over the fellowship time. Our project was definitely a big combination of data collection and analysis as well as communication. So we had our fellow work really closely with our full staff team. We have about 80 people in our company. And one of the most valuable things that we did was not only having her, of course, get all of the data and crunch all the numbers to get our scope 3 emissions for our carbon footprint analysis, but we really worked with our fellow to provide different opportunities for her to connect with different staff members at our company, both individually on specific things, whether it be learning about our wastewater treatment system, all the way through, connecting with our suppliers and our distribution partners. But also we had our fellow lead department-specific presentations of the carbon footprint analysis to different departments within our companies to create more engaging opportunities for our staff to engage with the content and for her to be able to answer questions and get ideas based on the operations that we do from the perspectives of different staff members. We also had her do a little article series in our employee newsletter over the course of her fellowship, where she was kind of breaking different aspects of the carbon footprint analysis apart into little mini bite-sized chunks for staff members to read on a weekly basis. And all of these aspects really created a very comprehensive and community-oriented fellowship opportunity on site for our fellow, where she naturally had had the opportunity to make a lot of connections with other staff members that I think added to the richness of her experience. So while having a really clear fellowship project and work plan was certainly critical to the success of our fellows' work, I think also as a host organization, taking the time in advance to think about all the different ways that you can really embed your fellow in your operations and in your staff team can help just make it that much more of a fruitful experience for your fellow and for you. I have to say, I feel like our fellow was a full-time member of our team. She was amazing, and I cry every day that we couldn't hire her. So be prepared to want to hire your fellow when they're leaving. It's very hard to have them say goodbye if you're not able to hire them. But I will say the amount of work that our fellow was able to accomplish at such an extremely high level with her own expertise, but really with the support of the full UNH Sustainability Institute team was just extremely impactful and exceeded all of our expectations. I've worked with and supported a lot of interns throughout my career, and this was by far the highest level experience that I've had in terms of impact that the fellow can have on your organization in terms of really implementing important projects that you might not have capacity or funds for to be able to implement. And it was just an amazing experience to be able to work with our fellow. And I also really enjoyed hearing about different projects from the other folks in our advisory group. There was a lot of overlap, and I definitely found that our experience, we were able to share some tips with other fellows who are working with other entities and vice versa. So that community that you get through the advisory group experience is also really helpful and really interesting. So I could talk on and on, but I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions after the fact as well.
Thank you, Garrett. That was extremely helpful, and thank you so much for sharing your experience. If you have any questions for Kara, please feel free to add them to the chat. And once we go towards the question and answer section towards the end, we would be happy to answer them. Next, we have Joe Fox from Northern Forest Center. We were so delighted that Joe hosted an undergraduate UNH student as their fellow this past summer. So Joe, please feel free to share your experience and how it was like hosting an undergraduate UNH fellow.
Sure. Wani, thank you so much for having me here. And it was honestly, it was a great pleasure to work with UNH Sustainability Institute this year. Kara, it'd be really easy for me to just say ditto everything that Kara said. But yeah, in all seriousness, this was a really exciting project for us. So Northern Forest Center is a regional nonprofit based in Concord, New Hampshire, that serves the northern tier of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. We do a lot of work in rural communities in that region. everything from supporting the forest products industry with new and innovative markets and supporting developments in that field to improving the facades of downtown buildings to investing in housing. We own properties in multiple communities in the Northeast, and are really trying to make this a region that people want to live, work, and play. My role as outdoor recreation manager is helping communities develop, market, and improve outdoor recreation assets. So I do a lot of work with trail-based communities. We work with a wide variety of nonprofits. One of the things that we did in 2024 was host this region-wide consortium, a symposium on outdoor recreation that was co-sponsored by the Northern Border Regional Commission. And a lot of ideas came out of this big regional event about, how do we support this industry? And one comment that came up was there's a lot of really small, struggling communities that need some hope, and they basically need inspiration. They need to see that other communities have invested in outdoor recreation and it's been successful for them. So this kind of idea of like case studies or storytelling had been kind of kicking around in our head, but we're a pretty small, lean nonprofit. It's like, I don't know that we have the time to really dive in and tell all these great stories. We certainly try to do those through, monthly newsletters and whatnot. So when we saw this opportunity come up, we started thinking about, okay, well, what could we use a fellow for? Like, what might be an interesting project? And this came up in a conversation, like, this would be an awesome project for someone to put 400 hours into really deep dives into how communities that have had successful outdoor recreation projects make them possible, and really with the theme here, make them sustainable. So we put together our description, and what I can say is that UNH honestly made this pretty easy for us. The template for like how to write a good project description was very helpful and made us really think about, okay, what exactly is this person going to do? And what Kara mentioned, I personally found the work plan template very helpful in breaking down time and tasks. And honestly, I feel like I benefited as a manager from the end of this 10 weeks in terms of like how to prepare for an employee essentially and make them feel welcome in the community, make them feel welcome in our organization, make sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and tools to succeed. And, so on day one, our fellow is showing up with email access to our task management software, access to shared document. Half of our company works remotely. So I actually am in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, even though we're based in New Hampshire. My fellow was located in Southern New Hampshire. So there was a significant amount of trust that we placed in our fellow and UNH to basically have someone work pretty much independently with very regular check-ins on Zoom and whatnot. But I would say that our experience was overwhelmingly positive. The co-interview process was great. I feel like all of the candidates we had, I think we ultimately interviewed 3 or 4 different applicants. And we were splitting hairs to determine, the best candidate. So the students were of very high quality. They all had relevant experience and interest in the projects that we put together. And I would also say the project advisory groups that Wania mentioned, my fellow was essentially doing a project that fell under the category, I think you called it community engagement. So there were some other students that were working on things like how to make outreach. There was a community in Connecticut that was trying to figure out how to make outreach to, traditionally marginalized or underrepresented communities. Like, why aren't these people showing up to town meeting, or how come they don't vote as much as everyone else? Like, how do we know what their needs and wants are? So they embedded students doing outreach in like farmers markets. And so we were able to share ideas. We had some great tours of the UNH campus, very inspiring about, how they're thinking about sustainability in terms of power plants on campus. And it's just an overwhelmingly positive experience that I highly recommend you really consider. And I'm happy to try to be a resource for anyone. And hopefully we'll come up with a great project idea for next year.
Thank you, Joe. That was really helpful to hear, and talking a little bit about your experience as thinking about a fellow and thinking about any ideas that would make perfect for a fellow. We also have an added resource that I'll be talking about later that would help you in sort of brainstorming further ideas on how fellows have worked in the past and if there are similar projects that you're looking at this year. Again, thank you both of you. And then I would want to talk a little bit about what sets the fellowship apart by just sharing another quote from a mentor. The fellowship has been a wonderful backdrop to host a dedicated research fellow who was very professional and well suited to dig up into our topic with us. The program duration went by very quickly, and this will be very important to consider when scoping any future projects with the fellowship. So yes, that is one thing that many of us highlight, that even the fellows, that the time goes by really quickly because they're enjoying their time so much. All right, now that you have sort of had a big picture view about what hosting a fellow is like and what can be accomplished in one summer, let's talk about the request for proposals. The RFP is currently out. When completing the application, you will be asked to complete and upload a project proposal. We recommend completing it before starting the online application. You can find it linked within the RFP. This document is where you will outline and give the basics of what project will be like. Alexis will now add the link to the chat for the host organization facing website. And if you're watching the recording of this, you can pause here and write down the link. This question often comes up from organizations as they apply. Can you host a fellow remote? As Joe talked about his experience and moving further from that, the design of the project is entirely up to you. The project could be fully remote, fully in person, or hybrid model. That is up to you, and we're happy to brainstorm and plan what is the best for you and your fellow. All fellows will come together in New Hampshire for the launch event. Fellows can sometimes be willing to relocate depending on the location and the format of the fellowship. What might a project look like? You can find the 2025 fellowship project description still up on the student-facing website. This can give you an idea of the large scope of what projects that make up the fellowship program. Your project proposal won't need to be as detailed as you see in the description, but it is a useful place to get ideas flowing and what a fellow can accomplish. It's great to look at. Moreover, this year, as I just mentioned, we are providing an added layer of support if you will be pursuing a project that UNH has expertise on or has worked on in the past. We have added a link to the RFP that contains project description as well as some work plans on topics we have seen host organizations work on repeatedly with their fellows, such as greenhouse gas inventories, sustainable performance assessment and strategies, policy data collection analysis. Please feel free to use and go over these as you brainstorm ideas for your fellowship, or even if you already have an idea and you feel like it would qualify for one of these, it is great to look at how other organizations sort of set the project description or set the work plan. Utilize these resources and create the best fit version for your organization. In the RFP, you will see information about co-supporting a fellow. UNH mutually invest with host organizations in the learning experience of each fellow and impactful outcome of each project. Fellows receive compensation for their work according to their level of education. Host partners are asked to contribute the following rates for 2026. For undergraduate fellows, it's $8,000. 6,500 you would be paying directly to the fellows and 1,500 to UNH to support programmatic costs, ensuring strong coordination, advising, and resources for the fellowship. Similar for the post-bac fellows, it's 11,500 with 10,000, which you will be paying directly to the fellows, and then 1,500 to UNH. And then I would also like to highlight that UNH raises funds to enable partners to host fellows, even if they're not able to contribute at this level. In your proposal, you will have the opportunity to state the level at which you can contribute. Through the generous support of Jane's Trust Foundation, partner organization, alumni of the program, and others, UNH is able to offer grants to offset a portion of the partner's contribution for many organizations, especially municipalities and nonprofits. Next steps. We recommend looking at RFP if you haven't already and downloading the project proposal to begin brainstorming and writing out your project. Just a reminder, your project proposal application won't be as detailed as the project description you see on the website, but if your project is chosen, this proposal will be the backbone for the project description. So if you sort of work on the project proposal right now, it makes it easier to put out the project description. So again, reach out to me or Alexis anytime if you have any questions or if you need any support in working on the project proposal, or if you want to set up a call just to discuss. And then just to highlight some of the important dates coming up, October 15th is the project proposal review beginning date. November 2nd is the deadline for project proposal submission. And then on November 25th, you will be notified about selection. All right, we have made it to the question and answer portion. Please feel free to chat any questions or unmute and ask any questions. You can look up on the website if you have any questions that you think would be answered on the website. But if you have any questions that you think are very specific to your case, please feel free to email Alexis or me to set up a meeting or just to ask those questions.
Hello?
I am.
Hello,
Yes.
good evening from Ghana.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Good evening from Ghana. My name is Sebastian and Apram. I've joined this information session to know much more about what the fellowship entails, and I really want to know if working with Asasi Foundation, an NGO in Ghana addressing plastic pollution, I stand a chance to be part of this fellowship.
Thank you, Sebastian, for joining us and for that question. I would also give some time for Alexis if she wants to talk about it, but I would say that we, in the Sustainability Fellowship specifically, work with organizations that are registered in US and especially in areas that are in the East Coast region. But we also have another Changemaker Fellowship, which is for international nonprofits, where international nonprofits work with UNH Sustainability Institute, and they get a team of students to collaborate with them. And they would come to Ghana. We actually have a group of students going to work with a nonprofit in Ghana this January as well. So please feel free to drop your email in the chat and we would email you specifically about that Changemaker Fellowship. Alexis just dropped the link to the website for Changemaker Fellowship as well.
Lonnie, a perfect answer. I would just say that in case anyone is on the call now or watching remotely or watching later, the recording, that if you have an organization here in New England that is working on efforts abroad, we have had fellows work on that before. So we had a, I forget, Center for Peace Building and Action, something like that, that was based in Boston, and they worked in Western Africa. And so the fellow worked with them and their team doing the work here, and they worked with grassroots organizations in Western Africa. So that was a little bit different because they had, like Wania was saying, they have headquarters here. But definitely look into the UNH International Changemaker Grant. I linked that website and highly recommend reaching out directly to the program coordinator, Zach Angelini, to get more information on that. And hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Dwyer. We probably should have said I always forget my title, but I work with the fellowship as well in managing it with Wania as well as some other programs. So happy to be here to support the info session.
Thank you, Sebastian. I also see a question from Kara about earlier one of the guest mentors, Joe Fox, mentioned remote engagement. Has the fellowship had experience with remote placement? And if so, how have mentors and organizations structured the engagement to ensure fellows still gain meaningful support and impact compared to in-person mentoring? There has been multiple organizations that have had completely remote fellows. I would say 2 years ago now, I was a fellow myself and I was a completely remote fellow. So when we are conducting interviews, this is one of the key things. If it is a completely remote position, we highlight to the fellow to make sure that we have that clarity with them so that they are interested in a remote position and they are up for it. And then when it comes to the summer, when they're already chosen and they're working for the organization, in the work plan, you will see that we encourage fellows to meet with their mentors weekly, to set up at least one meeting with them weekly. So that allows them, and the detailed work plan as well, allows them to have that structured work, even if they're completely remote or if they're working hybrid.
Does anyone else have specific questions for Kara or Joe? I highly recommend, like, this is a unique time because you can always set up a one-on-one with Wania later or myself, but we want to make sure to utilize their time while they're here.
I see your question, Mercurio, but I think for what you mentioned, it would be International Changemaker Fellowship that would be a better fit for a student to work with a nonprofit that works in Tanzania and US.
Thank you.
And Kelsey, if you want to talk about it further, just in case, we're always happy to set up a call.
Cool, sounds good.
Clara, we have a question for you. You mentioned that your fellow worked on a GHG inventory. Has your organization since been able to duplicate/learn from the process so that the work continues post-fellowship?
Yes, that was one of our big priorities because while we do definitely hope to host another fellow, hopefully this coming summer, we wanted to make sure that the work that our fellow did was something that like we could then absorb into our staff capacity. So we just did our whole analysis this year. So we started with the Climate Action Clinic in January of 2025, and then started with our fellow to complete our carbon footprint analysis in June. So we just finally completed everything. And our fellow did an amazing job of just like setting us up for success for the next one. There was like a detailed like spreadsheet that had links to exactly where she got all of the data. She provided like explanations on exactly how we came to certain conclusions, because anybody who's been involved with the greenhouse gas inventory or will be in the future will know that like things get very nuanced and very like complicated, and you want to like remember all of that institutional knowledge. The other thing is we chose to utilize UNH Sustainability Institute's platform. So by utilizing their greenhouse gas platform, it's really awesome because you as a company can just like pay an annual fee for future years to keep using that same SciMap is what it's called, their platform. And so what's really exciting for us about next year is not only that we know how to get all of the data, which was like such a big effort to begin with, but that we can actually just like update all of that data for the next year in the same system. So not only getting that data in like Excel format, but having all of the calculations and all of the visualizations that SciMap offers kind of ready to go for us to be able to implement that on our own next year and be able to compare and contrast to each year, I think will be a lot more feasible. The other thing I'll just mention for anyone that's considering like greenhouse gas inventorying, we also had other people in our advisory group that were doing greenhouse gas inventories, like the whole thing, like scopes 1 through 3 in their fellowship timeframe. And we did hear like some feedback that that was like kind of a lot for the fellow to take on all of scopes 1 through 3 in the fellowship time period. So what I would recommend that worked really well for us was having like scopes 1 and 2 kind of done prior, or just having your fellow focus on scopes 1 and 2. But if you're gonna get into scope 3, there's so many different categories, and like each one is really its own potential fellowship project, that in order to make sure your fellow doesn't get too bogged down in the weeds of the data collection side of things, having some of that basic data already collected and ready was really helpful. The other thing for us, because we were able to work kind of on this whole project starting in January through the end of the fellowship in the summer, we had already like onboarded a lot of our staff members ahead of time to the fact that we're doing this greenhouse gas inventory, giving them some ideas about it and things like that. And so once our fellow came on board, like our staff were like waiting for her emails, like they were like ready to like jump on them. And so our fellow really didn't lose any time with trying to track people down too much. Of course, there's always things that you're not going to know, it's going to take longer, but highly recommend for anyone doing this to try to get some of the legwork ready in advance to make sure your fellow can spend their valuable time doing the hard work of like crunching the numbers and doing the analysis and not just tracking people down with emails. And I'm seeing Brett's comment in the chat. Hi, Brett, Allagash, you guys are awesome. And we did a post-bac fellow. We were extremely lucky because in our case, our fellow had been working with the Climate Action Clinic for a few years as a student at UNH, and then worked at the Sustainability Institute for the semester before she became our fellow. So she was basically an expert in the SciMap platform and all of the greenhouse gas accounting. I definitely think like UNH Sustainability Institute's undergraduate students who we worked with through the Climate Action Clinic were also really wonderful to work with. And depending upon the project and the level of expertise that you really need to do the work, there's certainly undergraduate students that could do fellowships at a high level. So in our case, we just wanted to get really into the nitty-gritty of scope 3 and wanting to make sure someone had a really deep format experience with that, but highly still would recommend undergraduate fellows too, just depending on what your project is.
And I can follow up on that, Brett. So we had an undergraduate student who was phenomenal. So for our program, it was really, I needed someone who was self-directed, who's like not afraid to pick up a phone, call people, schedule Zoom meetings, do a lot of self-directed work in researching the history of certain projects, like let's say the development of a whitewater park in Franklin, New Hampshire, or the work that was done but via Ascutney Outdoors to kind of take an old defunct ski area and like bring it back to life and be a big part of the community. So Kaylee Mullins was her name. She was phenomenal. She's like handled all those phone calls, took exceptionally detailed notes, put together a pretty visually stunning final report that we will have posted on our website pretty soon. We're doing some final checks, running it by everyone. So lots of interviews. Like she spent a phenomenal amount of time on Zoom, interviewed all of our staff, our in-house staff that worked on those projects to make sure we had the history of like grant applications and what happened at the municipal level, what were the conditions that were put into place to make these projects successful. So it was great. And earlier I mentioned the again, the project advisor groups. Just want to speak to that again. Like one of the students, one of Kaylee's cohort mates, was working with a nature conservancy, and so pretty interesting. You know, they're known a lot for you know, land trust type of work, or yeah, getting involved in conservation easements and things like that. But one of the things that's come up and that our organization is really interested in and invested in is housing. And so there was this concept of like, if Nature Conservancy is known as we want to protect nature. But to do that, like people still need a place to live. So maybe Nature Conservancy is actually thinking about like, what does it mean to do like infill development or somehow support the type of work that we're doing, which is taking underutilized like commercial buildings and converting them to housing in rural downtowns so that you can kind of preserve this concept of like urban sprawl. So again, that just because of being a part, like that wasn't expected, right? And that may not always happen, but you don't know what can come from being a part of this fellowship community. So that's now led to some really productive conversations between the Northern Forest Center and the Nature Conservancy that like that's just a new opportunity for maybe future partnership and maybe a next level fellowship comes out of that next year. Like we'll see. So yeah, I can't recommend the program highly enough.
Thank you, Gara, and thank you, Joe, for answering that question. I would add a little bit to that, saying that if your organization has the capacity, you can host more than one fellow. And if your organization feels like the scope of the project is not something that could be accomplished in 1 year, a lot of organizations do come back to host a fellow building on the same project next year as well. I see a question about during the course of the fellowship, do you find that the projects are sometimes adjusted or tailored based on the fellow's skills and interest? If so, how flexible is the program in allowing those changes? So the work plan that we mentioned earlier is sort of a living document that we provide the mentors, the host organizations, as well as the fellows to use during the fellowship as well as prior to the fellowship. So the host organizations would make that 10-week program. In the first week of the fellowship, we encourage the fellows to go over it and discuss it with their mentor. If they feel like the work is too much, too less, like, have those conversations with them, make the edits so that once they start working on it, they also feel comfortable in making sure that the work that they have is able to be in their capacity. And then again, as we move ahead in the fellowship, a lot of projects, we realize that there are different things that keep getting added to the work plan. Some of them are different, some of them like come off the work plan. So again, it's a learning living document and it continues throughout the fellowship, but it's really a good point to have that before the fellow starts for you to understand how the 10 weeks would flow so that you don't feel like that like time like got caught up and you didn't end up having enough impact as you were expecting at the start of the fellowship. And the flexibility part, I would say, is more dependent on the host organization because it is for their organization and the impact that would be having on their organization. So it is more up to the mentor and the fellow that the conversation they have about flexibility than us. And we are, of course, always there to advise if needed.
I can add one thing to that. I found that like getting as sort of deep or specific as possible when creating the work plan helped me make sure that like it felt like a reasonable amount of work, and like thinking about, okay, they're going to need to be asking for this information during this week, and then it's going to take a week for people to respond, and then a week later they would be able to implement that thing that they were working on. I think I've never done like a detailed work plan before, hosting an intern before, but doing that legwork, I think really helped create like a reasonable expectation in advance of the fellow coming on. I definitely feel like I wrote the project description like pretty generally and hadn't really thought about the detailed nitty-gritty until I got to the work plan phase. One thing that I did in the work plan that I would recommend for people is like, depending on your project, maybe your project is already like very complicated and comprehensive, but I thought ours was just doing the full scope 3 analysis. Like I thought that might be, even more than a fellow could take on for a whole like summer. But what I did is I kind of threw into the work plan like some possible other projects, like if there was time, or possible other components. For instance, something that we were interested in was like, okay, once you do the carbon footprint analysis and you create the recommendations, if you have time, researching local options for offsets, or if you have time, mocking up a potential spread about the carbon footprint analysis that we could put into our impact report for next year. And I ended up finding that while I wrote them in the report or in the work plan of like, if there's time, having them in there, like our fellow was already like thinking and kind of like planning to do that. And all of these like extra little project ideas that I had ended up getting created and getting implemented during our fellowship, because I think like the work plan was pretty like well thought out and like reasonable. So we certainly discussed the work plan the first week of the fellowship to make sure our fellow was comfortable with everything, and she was. But I was surprised to see how like everything in the work plan was able to be created. So I would recommend, if you have some of those like, bonus or dream like extra little components to your project, like put them in there and make sure that you have an opportunity to discuss with your fellow if it feels feasible. But I definitely would recommend like thinking about those, because we ended up finding, like, I think similar to what Joe mentioned, like our fellow was just like really great at like visualizations. And we were like, once we saw that, we're like, oh my gosh, we want her to like find all these other ways she can like share these visualizations with different audiences. So it's definitely worth thinking about those bonus opportunities if there's time.
Yeah, and I will say on the opposite end of that, we actually did make an adjustment, like a kind of a midstream adjustment to the scope of work, and scaled it back, and that had nothing to do whatsoever with our fellow. It was definitely like a little bit of overambition on our part of the scope of work when we started thinking about the fact that, one, these are folks that are involved in outdoor recreation projects, many of whom were volunteers of local boards or local committees, or work for nonprofits, or are involved in like youth education programs. Like the summer's their busy time. So trying to do this type of research project where there was like in-depth case study analysis, setting up interviews, like that, it just kind of takes time. And so it was also this scope where we started. So the real project was, we served 4 different states: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York. And so our idea was, let's find 2 incredible stories from each state. So there's 8, and like maybe we'll go to like 9. So we ended up going to 9 projects, but 9 projects that are in geographically diverse areas that represent different types of projects. So we had like aquatic-based recreation, we had rock climbing, we had skiing, we had a mountain biking thing, we had like a hiking, land conservation project. So there was like all these really unique projects. The idea was to take from those case studies, find similarities that could then be used as recommendations for communities to like learn from that and have this essentially like community recreation toolkit. Getting 9 incredible case studies done in and of itself was an amazing project. There's definitely like an executive summary and some great suggestions. But to think that we were going to have this like website portal with like, if you're this type of organization looking for hints on this, like use this really detailed, graphic design, slick like videos and tutorials. It's a great idea. The reality is the state of New Hampshire actually got some funding to do just that. So now it's like we're taking Kaylee's work and helping inform this other much bigger project that's bigger than anything we could have done on our own. Even if we had five, if we had five fellows working on this summer, we probably still wouldn't have achieved what's going to happen from this other multi-agency, very large project. So the work was not for naught. It's great, and people have really liked the project already. That the work that Kaylee's done. I've emailed it to folks like, this is awesome. I'm going to reach out about this grant or that grant, and reach out to those people. So the tool is effective, but yeah. So we did change the game a little bit midway, and honestly, we all breathed a sigh of relief, and we're able to just go in even harder on the case study. So yeah, I would say be rigidly flexible.
Also, just one other thing on the like tailoring the fellowship experience to your fellow, I would just say like don't underestimate the amazing hiring process that UNH Sustainability Institute leads, like the level of the candidates that we got in terms of their specific interest in like our company, our project, and expertise. Like, of course, like you can always tailor something to the person, but like if you write the right project description that you're really looking for, like UNH will find you like the right candidate to be able to implement exactly your vision. So I don't think there was much that like we had to change as a result of like the fellow that we got or something like that.
Thank you, Kara. I would definitely agree. We have a great pool of applicants that we struggle every year shortlisting because everyone is so great. But if we have any last questions. All right, if we do not have any more questions, I would just end with another mentor's quote. This is my second year hosting a fellow, and I really enjoyed the experience both times. Having a fellow is a great way to add capacity needed to complete a project that otherwise likely wouldn't get done. The fellows bring new energy and excitement to the work, and it's rewarding to help them learn more about what a career in sustainability could look like. So with that, I would end the info session. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Bye.